We started off by discussing the sprint, the container event of all the formal events. We want to talk about the sprint planning. The sprint planning initiates the sprint by laying out the work to be performed for the sprint. So this is where we come together to discuss all that we hope to achieve and even edit the product backlog. This resulting plan is created by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team. Now take note, there are people who should attend various Scrum events, which includes the sprint as a container event, the sprint planning, which we're discussing now, the sprint retrospective and the sprint review, and the daily Scrum, which we'll discuss later, contains various activities and various attendees in these activities. So an event is like a party. Not all Scrum team members can attend all Scrum events, but the sprint planning is one of the Scrum events attended by the entirety of the Scrum team. The product owner ensures that attendees are prepared to discuss the most important product backlog items and how they map to the product goal. This invariably means that the product owner comes into the sprint planning meeting with an already made product backlog ready for editing. So the Scrum Master and the developers come to the sprint planning meeting with the intent to discuss some of the product backlog items that have been supplied by the product owner. The Scrum team may also invite other people to attend the sprint planning to provide advice. Other people like the stakeholders, they come into the sprint planning meeting to provide advice because they may have a bit of opinion on how they intend the product to look like. I must say here that I have to define what a stakeholder is. A stakeholder is anyone who is affected or is in close relationship with a change, a need, or a solution. And there are a plethora of people who are considered stakeholders. They may include customers, end users, testers, CEOs, and so on. Sprint planning addresses 3 topics, and these are the topics that is addressed during sprint planning. Number 1, why is this sprint valuable? Why do we need to come together to iterate and solve these complex problems? Number 2, what can be done this sprint? What is the extent of work we need to achieve in this sprint? Now, if you answer the question of what can be done, you may be able to determine what will be the agreed upon sprint length, because it is the intensity of work that we intend to do that also determines the length of how long we intend to iterate and do this work. How will the chosen work get done? What are the methods, the principles, the approaches that we're going to use to solve the problem? These are the 3 questions that are answered during sprint planning meeting. The sprint goal, the product backlog items selected for the sprint, plus the plan for delivering them are together referred to as the sprint backlog. The output of our sprint planning produces another list of items and plan called the sprint backlog. Remember that the sprint backlog contains all the rationed items of what we intend to achieve in a sprint, not in the entirety of the project. Projects produces products. Sprint produces increment. Sprint planning is time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. If the sprint is shorter, it will usually have a shorter sprint planning duration. So, for instance, if we have a 2-week sprint, we ideally are supposed to have a less than 8 hours sprint planning. As a rule of thumb, which is not part of the Scrum framework, we should do 4 hours, but we should not do up to 8 hours of sprint planning for a sprint that is less than 1 month. That's just the idea. So if we have a 2-week sprint length, we should ideally have a 4 hours sprint planning time.